All right, in today's episode, I'm going to teach you about the financial freedom framework. And so this is my personal framework that I built because I'm sick of people asking me how to become financially free when in fact I lay it out every single day. And so this is going to be super easy, and this is intentionally easy because I want you guys to have an exact framework to follow. And so oftentimes when it comes to financial freedom, people say that they just need to make more money and they end there. They get all frustrated and they curl up in a ball and start crying. We don't want to do that. And so here at Budget Dog, I take all my students through general frameworks, processes, flows, all that kind of stuff in order to fix their financial problems, right? At the end of the day, and have a solution for them. And so if you're listening to this, I want you to take note of everything we talk about today and apply this to your life. And if you do, you'll see financial freedom. Now, as part of this, it's going to take time. And so anybody online telling you that you can get rich overnight or within a year, we'll talk about it, but it's very unlikely. It's very unlikely, and it takes a lot of effort from you versus the market. And we'll talk about the differences here shortly. So there's 5 steps to this whole plan, right? Assuming that we got time on our side, okay? Number 1 is make money. That might sound obvious, but let me talk about it. So we're going to walk through the situation, we're going to walk through the problem, and we're going to walk through the solution of each one of these steps. And so the first one is make money. That's the situation, right? So what is the situation of making money, earning money in America? Number 1, we could be W-2, work a regular job. I worked at Deloitte at one point in time. Maybe you're a 1099 contractor. Maybe you're a consultant, somebody that doesn't necessarily have benefits, works for a company directly, but you do work, you help them out, you assist them, and therefore you're a 1099. Or, a lot of people on my team here at Budget Dog are considered 1099 employees, or not employees, but 1099 contractors as well. So you could select that way, right? The W-2, kind of the more predictable way, 1099 or whatever the case is. Or you could go entrepreneur, full-time entrepreneur. And I have experience on both sides. And so I want to talk about the differences of both sides, generally speaking. I don't want to make this episode about this. But when you have a predictable income, a lot of people downplay that. And in today's world, a lot of people are making over $100,000 or a lot of money. And I think I saw a statistic saying that 60% of U.S. households combined are making over $100,000. And don't quote me on that one, but I'm pretty sure I heard that one recently. I was actually shocked by it. I was like, wow, that's a lot of households making over $100,000 per year. And so you don't need to make over $100,000 per year, but we do need to know what our income is. And I think it's really, really important. And I think the W-2 route is perfectly fine to build a lot of wealth. I did it. My wife did it. We've switched since, and we went entrepreneur mode because we want to personally seek out our purpose and our goals, and that's helping people with financial freedom, number 1, because we've been able to do that journey ourselves, and we love to see the impact we're making each and every day. And so I say we because my wife is actually very on board with this whole process because we went through it together. And so she loves to see the student wins within Budget Dog Academy, and we talk about all the time, in fact. And then obviously my people on the inside of Budget Dog, we have about 15 or so individuals that are working on the inside of Budget Dog to make it happen, to make it work every single day. And so if you guys are looking to level up and go into Budget Dog Academy, we will put the application process in the show notes below so that you can apply, work with my team, talk with my team, see if it makes sense, see if we can help you at the end of the day, and go forward of joining a group, a wealth mastermind, essentially, where we talk about wealth and we build wealth with you every single day. And we give you an exact roadmap to financial freedom. So we do all this stuff internally. And so the big situation here is obviously which route are you going to go? And I think a little bit of both could make sense too. You could do a side hustle. You could also do the W-2 and 1099 predictable income. And ultimately, that's okay. That's all grand and well. But what is the problem that a lot of individuals face here? And the problem is not having enough. And so there's 2 things to this. Number 1 is you need to define enough. And if you don't take this step today and you define what enough is, you'll always be on the treadmill. No matter if you're an entrepreneur, no matter if you're W-2. You know how many people, entrepreneurs, I've heard tell in my circles about, man, I wanted to get off the treadmill, so I went the entrepreneur route. And I'm like, man, you're on the treadmill and you're running faster than I've ever seen anybody at a W-2 run. That happens a lot. And so just because you're an entrepreneur and just because you don't have a boss, quote unquote, a lot of times money is a lot of people's boss, and it never ends. And this part right here is the biggest problem with making money, is you don't know how much you need, so you constantly are chasing and constantly thinking income is your issue. It's not. It's really not. There are some people out there that are making $30,000 that need to increase their income, and there's no secret about it. And this isn't a shot at anybody making, let's call it $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year with a family of 3, but that in itself, we need to make more money, and we'll talk about the solutions in a second. My mom was a private school teacher growing up. She made $30,000 a year. My dad was in the mortgage business. He made a lot more money. But if my mom was a single mom or she was on her own, that would be a significant issue from a money perspective, okay? So W-2, 1099 entrepreneur, I don't really care what you are. Just remember like the pros and cons of each, right, at the end of the day. And you can also do one. You don't have to do one or the other. You can do both. But not earning enough or defining enough is your biggest problem in this situation. And so if you have a clear financial roadmap that we talk about in Budget Dog Academy, you know if you save X percentage, let's say 20% of your income, you know when you'll hit financial freedom. You'll know that. Like, it's a very clearly defined process. And so it's not stressful. And I talk about like the levels of financial freedom all the time, specifically in my national bestseller, The Roadmap to Financial Freedom. I talk about this directly. And I say the number one thing is defining enough, because if I know I can save 20% of my income and I know in 20 years that means I'll be financially free, I don't stress instantly. My stress goes down. My cortisol levels go down. My blood pressure goes down. My doctor likes me a lot more. And if I know that, I don't necessarily need to be at that goal, the end goal, or the end of the process. But I do need to know what's coming. And known and unknown in the human psyche is very, very important, because every scary movie focuses on the unknown because they know that gets to people. And so if you just know simply whether you're there or not, you just know that you'll be okay, and you'll know financial freedom will be in 20 years and it's clearly defined and there is no stress around that, you're not going to feel like you're never having enough. You know that anything additional is bonus or cherry on the top, or it speeds up your process. And that's a good place to be. So defining your enough is important. Now, let's say you don't earn enough. Obviously, defining your enough, you need the solution there would be having a clear financial roadmap. But if you don't earn enough, like you truly don't earn enough money, and that is a big issue, the number one thing I tell everybody to do is invest in your skill set in your relevant market. What do I mean by that? And so a lot of people are like, well, I don't have money, so therefore I can't invest. You don't have money because you don't have skills that are valuable to the market. And so if I have to take out a loan to do this, I'm doing this 110%, because I've done and seen a lot of stuff of different levels of financial freedom. And every single time, somebody that doesn't make enough money is not focused on their skill sets, because at the end of the day, the U.S. is a marketplace that's providing goods and services. And if you provide a good and service that's well worth your time, well worth everything, you are going to get paid accordingly, or at least paid enough. Now, you don't need to make $1 million. It's not the goal here. The goal is to make enough, to put food on the table, to save some money back. And that's really what it comes down to. And I think a lot of people are so focused on just making more money, they never define enough, or they make too little and they're afraid to invest in themselves because they're like, well, I got to take out debt to invest in myself. Well, what else are you going to do? Like, I'm not a big believer in debt. Let me tell you that very clearly. I don't love debt. I don't love the idea of taking out debt. I think there are creative ways, in fact, that you could get the money to invest in skill sets. And I'll give you an example. Like, my wife was in the interior design field, and there's a software called 2020 where she designs online program, kitchens, bath, all that kind of stuff. She bought a software worth, I think it was $2,500 at the time. This is back in like 2016 or so. She bought a software that was $2,500 or so, something like that. And she started building a skill set of 2020 so that she could go be a contractor outside of her W-2 and make more money. And she did. She made like $50 an hour under the table. Don't tell the IRS. But that is literally what you can be doing. And so she bought the $2,500 program. She invested into herself. But a lot of people with a broken mindset, they're not focused on making money. It is way deeper than that. It's not, oh, I can go make more money if I invest in myself. They don't have the mindset of investing in themselves. So therefore, everything's a cost. that is where most people stay broke forever. Let me be very clear about this first bullet point. Making money is such an emotional process because you either can't define enough, you run a little treadmill forever, or you don't make enough truly, like $30,000 a year with a family of two, and you are afraid to invest in your skill set to increase your income. There is no other way to increase your income without investing in your skill set. And this could be from a time, it doesn't always have to be cost. It could be time, it could be trainings, it could be free group meetups, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you need to invest in yourself. I have students investing in the academy all the time, but they don't look at it as a cost. They look at it as an investment to fix their financial future and change their financial life. If I told you something cost $100,000, that gives you no context. If I say I'm going to give you invest $100,000, you give me $100,000, and that's not the cost of my academy, just an example. And I say I'm going to give you $1 million with time. Would you do that? That's a 10x return. Yeah, you would do that. You would find everything possible to find $100,000. If I gave you a Lamborghini for $5,000, you'd say, yeah, hell yeah, because you know the value of the Lamborghini is more than $5,000. So let's be clear, the value of that skill set is greater than the cost you pay often. And when you start to look at it like that, you're going to make more money. And that's that's step one of this financial freedom framework. So understanding the situation, the problem, the solution. Number two is building a systematic engine of this financial framework. And so the solution or the situation here is a financial system that's sustainable for you. So sustainability is really key in the financial world because a lot of people will either sacrifice too much to where they think it's not doable long term, or they're like, man, this stinks, I don't want to do this. And people aren't good at resistance. So I know that, and I try to build systems that work for long term for anybody. And everyone looks different. And so all my student situations, they're all generally automation, index funds, ETFs, tax strategies, estate planning, all of this stuff, budgeting, financials, all that kind of stuff. Generally speaking, that applies to everybody, 100% of people. But your timeline, how much you do, what you do, of the options you have, which options you select. Do you invest in a 401k? Do you invest in an IRA? Do you invest in a taxable brokerage? There are a lot of different angles that you can take within the financial world. And the cool thing with us is we don't have an incentive to push you one direction. I don't care where you work. I give you all your options. Are you better at Vanguard? Are you better at Fidelity? Is there better of a mix? Do you want a 401k? Which tax strategies apply to you? Does a trust apply to your situation? Does a will apply to your situation? Do you need a financial health, or a financial power of attorney? Do you need a healthcare power? All of these questions are relevant to the individual, and there's no one size fits all. But you need to build a sustainable engine for you that's automated this whole process. And so the problem here lies is the lack of education. Because when I say the process, when I say the system, what's going through your head right now? Ask yourself, is it very clear cut? Is it kind of like, well, I think I need a budget. I think I need my investments. Or do you know exactly, precisely every single step of the equation to build this automated financial system, an engine that's sustainable for the next 40 years? Do you know that answer? If you don't, you need to apply to the academy. If you do, continue the process. But the lack of education is the problem here. So by default, what do you think the solution is? It's education. It's pretty clear cut, right? Education would be the solution to lack of education. And oftentimes I talk to people about people ask me, what's the first investment I should make? I say education without question. I've been online, I've worked with enough people at this point in time where my answer used to be different, and it's changed to education for almost every single beginner because of how important and how different your outcome is going to be if you know more. If I knew what Bill Gates knew right now, I'd be Bill Gates, right? It's pretty obvious, but no one ever thinks like that. Everyone's like, well, I don't know if this education is good enough. Step number one was make money. Step number two was build systematic engine. Step number three is the joining the wealth groups or joining the right circles. Very, very important. I'll talk about my personal situation in a second. But these might be higher level masterminds. These could be groups that discuss wealth. This could be this podcast right here. It just depends what you're trying to accomplish, right? But joining the right circles will change your life. And I'll tell you this from experience is that my whole life up to about 22 years old, I don't think I've ever talked about money in my life. Didn't know about it. My family didn't talk about it. My friends didn't talk about it. The groups I hung out with didn't talk about it. And guess what my net worth was? Negative $8,000. Shocker, right? Didn't talk about wealth, didn't know about wealth, and therefore I had a bad net worth. Fast forward to 23 years old, I started my career at Deloitte. Man, people are really smart at Deloitte. They talk about money. They earn more money. They invest more money. They talk about wealth hacks. They conversate about that stuff. And I joined, and I have a podcast on this. You guys can look back at it. My 3 Deloitte mentors that changed my life forever, because I joined a group, whether it was through my job, whether it was a free group I go on the weekends, whether it was a friend group that talks about the right stuff. I joined a group essentially at the end of the day. It was my career, but it really, really helped in a big, big way. And a lot of my Budget Dog Academy students are in a group, Budget Dog Academy being one of those wealth groups that they paid to play, but it's changed their life in ways they can't even fathom. They can't even imagine when they first joined of how it's changed their life. And it's a lifetime group that you're joining to be part of the Academy. The Academy is the best financial program in the world. And I'm not saying this to sell this by any means. That's how good it is. Like, I've seen the proof. The proof is in the pudding, man. We have 1,500 when I'm recording this in August of the amount of people that we have in this academy that have done incredible things. Multiple people becoming millionaires and counting. Like, every single day, people crossing that $1 million mark. Guest experts, professionals coming on every single Monday. It's incredible. It is something unlike anything I've ever seen. And I didn't know when I was creating it how important this group was going to be, or how big or how impactful it was going to be. To be honest, I just had a general vision. I knew I wanted to help people. I knew my stuff. I didn't need to go do bells and whistles or, sell a pipe dream. I know the fundamentals of wealth. I know how to build wealth. I built multiple millions of dollars of wealth. I've joined the right circles, and a big reason I'm worth multiple millions of dollars is because of the wealth circles I've joined. I go on record all the time saying 0 to $1 million was very fundamental. It was still joining the right wealth groups. It was still talking with the right people, getting the right things in my brain, thinking about things the right way. But after $1 million to 1 to 2 to 2 to 3 and so on and so forth, a lot of it's connections, a lot of it's access, a lot of it's, I just invested in a private equity deal today. You don't get those types of offers and opportunities unless you're in the right groups at the end of the day. And so the problem is you don't have connections or you don't have invites. And so there's a few things you can do. And number one, podcast, man, I'm telling you right now, podcast and following the right people on social media, is the easiest way to fix this problem today. Without question, it can be free. Become obsessed with winning in the process. Become obsessed with learning about wealth. And man, you're going to find out. I can tell you right now, you join things like Bigger Pockets for real estate. You join things for a Budget Dog Academy for personal finance. You join different groups to get access to different deals. And these aren't always paid groups. Some of these are just free social media accounts. My social media account's free. My YouTube, my podcast, my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook, my TikTok, those are all free. My email list, you guys can get that stuff for free. You can join my group theoretically today, my Millionaire Room on Instagram. There's so many ways you guys can work within my circle. Listening to this podcast is going to change your life. I know it for a fact because I remember myself listening to different podcasts, and I eventually became what they talked about. And I can't stress enough how important behind this camera, actually, I have a big award from a big company of hitting a certain mile marker in my business. And that started when I was it was 2020, about 4 to 5 years ago. I listened to his podcast every single day when I cut grass, when I worked out, when I drove my car, when I was at home with my wife. I listened to that podcast and I imagined, and I'm not a big fan of manifestation, but I really imagined myself in that scenario. And now as I'm recording this podcast, and I do it intentionally right behind this camera, I have that award on the wall to remind myself of intentionality in joining the right groups changed my life forever. It's not an exaggeration, guys. This is real life stuff. You guys have seen my growth from getting out of debt to becoming a multimillionaire. I'm sharing the journey. I'm not holding back anything. I'm sharing everything. And you guys can follow along if you would like. So joining wealth groups, guys, is the biggest thing. The problem is no connections or invites. The solution is begin for free and become obsessed, and you'll find your circle and you'll join your circles. Whether you provide value to them, whether you pay for those circles, just get involved. Number 4 is buying cash flow assets. So when you make the money, you build your systematic engine, and then you join the right wealth groups, you're going to talk about cash flowing assets. This is the next step of the financial freedom framework, number 4. And so the first thing we want to do is define what cash flowing assets are. You might hear that terminology online, but a lot of people don't explain what that is, right? These are assets such as real estate, such as stocks, such as businesses, the 3 big ones. Those, you buy an asset, you buy a house, a rental property, you buy stocks, they produce a dividend. You buy into a company as an equity owner and they produce cash flow. Those 3 assets are producing something. And so when I talk about buying things, the only thing I've conditioned my brain so much to think cash flow assets that fit my situation, it's like that's all I think about. So when I think about how I spend my money, sure, can I spend on experiences? Yes. Do I spend on my daughter's health? Yes. Do I spend on my health, my wife's health? Yes. And that's an investment in itself, right? Health and experiences. But outside of that, unless there's real true value, like a cash flowing asset that I know I can put money, transfer, exchange from a dollar bill that literally is losing money to buying an asset that holds its value and or appreciates in value and spits off cash flow, whether it be in the form of, let's call it rental money, or, rent collection, whether it's dividends from a stock, whether it is, or index fund for that matter, right? Or whether it's, cash flow from a business that you own. It's real obvious to me. Those are my 3 spots. So if I keep doing that for a long enough time, I'm going to eventually flip the script. And so what we're here to do and buy cash flowing assets, to find the cash flowing asset that makes most sense. I knew that rental properties did not make sense for me. So I went the syndication route where I am a totally passive investor, but I get mailbox money. I get quarterly checks. I get a big payout at the end of that 3 to 5 year hold period. Syndications are awesome. The stock market, I've been in index funds and ETFs ever since I can remember, the last 11 years, and I've consistently bought every single week for 11 years. I've never missed a week, and that's consistently produced dividends. I make $30,000 a year as of today from my dividends alone, and that's not even something I take out and cash out. I reinvest those dividends. I reinvest the cash flow that's coming from my assets. This is how you get wealthy. And in my business, I have, like I said, I have private equity investment today. I've had multiple other business interests. I own my own business. There's a lot of cash flow coming from those things. That is a recurring, profitable model. And when you put these 3 things and other things, obviously, that are cash flowing assets into your picture, you can't lose. And it's just a recurring recycling process. And eventually it becomes so big that the only thing holding you back at this point in time is lack of education. And like I said, if you have the education to do this stuff, you're going to become the wealthy individual we're referring to, the financial freedom individual we're referring to. You'll hit the framework that we're talking about. But you got to join those right groups. You got to make the money first. You got to build the systematic engine second. You got to join the wealth groups. Then you got to buy the cash flowing assets. What's next? Shift your income that's active to passive. And so you're kind of doing this by default, right? A transfer from the middle class to the wealthy is what I like to think about. I'm moving my money as a regular middle class American, making income, taking my money and going to buy boats and cars and houses that aren't producing cash flow. And I'm going to go through that cycle my whole entire life until I decide to change the middle class outcome I grew up in or income I grew up in. And I'm going to take that income, I'm going to buy cash flowing assets then in order to go to passive income entirely. There are a few benefits to this. Number 1 is you shift your income entirely from active, meaning you don't have to work anymore. That's probably the biggest benefit, to literally passive. Like I told you, I make $30,000 alone from dividends per year. We only spend $70,000, $80,000 a year as a family unit, of a family of 4. So if I by default have I'm almost half of my income through dividends already. My real estate syndications are paying quarterly checks, and that only stacks on top of each other with time. And then the big payouts that come from the 3 to 5 year holding period. I'm earning income from that as well. And then from my businesses alone, from my business interest, from my own business, we're generating cash flow from that as well. And so I don't have to be an active individual in my business if I don't want to. I love it because I love to do what I've done because I built a life that I like to be active in. I get bored if I'm not, and I love to help you guys. Going back to the initial purpose of this entire podcast is a financial freedom framework. I built my financial freedom framework so I have the power of choice now. I choose to do this podcast. I don't have to do this podcast. I choose to do this podcast because I love it. I love educating you guys. I love sharing my story. I love being able to say, hey, I see you right here. And I remember I was 23 and I was in the same spot. And I'm 32 now, and I know I can get you from 23 to 32 of the same pathway I took, but you can go quicker because I know with the Roadmap to Financial Freedom, a millionaire's guide to building automated wealth, I know for a fact you can do this as well. And so it's an amazing place to be, transferring that income from middle class to the wealthy. But also, here's the other benefit, is the tax structure becomes better as well. So people get mad that you make more money and you pay less tax, but that's just how the tax code's written. When you shift your active income to passive income, it shifts from income tax to capital gains tax, two separate types of taxes. And so when you're paying capital gains tax, you're either 0, 15, or 20%, unless Biden gets a hold of the capital gains structure and resets that. But as of now, 0, 15, and 20%, depending on where your income is. Whereas your active income, there's 7 different layers, but you can be all the way up to 37%. And so 37% or 20% is a big difference in income. And when you shift, that's a huge savings. Think about if you're talking about millions of dollars on 17%. That is a massive difference. But not only is it the tax savings here and now, which most people, average middle class people, are thinking about, well, I can save X amount of dollars right now. What do you do with the money that you get back from a tax, let's call it a tax asset, and you take that money and you put it back into tax or cash flowing asset? Or there are tax schemes, 1031 exchanges, things like that. You could do, different things like cost segregation structure or cost segregation studies. And you're literally gamifying the tax code with the passive income that you have. And this is why the wealthier get wealthier. They pay literal less tax because the structure of the income is different. Those are the biggest benefits. Now, the problem here mainly isn't lack of education, because if you made the money, you've invested in yourself, right? You built the systematic engine that you built financially, and you've invested in the education. You've joined the wealth group, so you become more educated that way. You bought the cash flowing assets. Your last issue is not education or lack of education. Your issue at this stage of the game is patience. And I want to be very clear about that. It's patience. Because I had somebody I talked to our group last night that became a millionaire in 10 years. I became a millionaire in about 7 years. And I talk about this all the time. That's a relatively quick trajectory to millionaire status, 7 or 10 years. But most of the individuals in my academy that are, because it's a requirement to earn over $100,000, is they move probably at a 10-year pace. Some of them move at 5-year paces or 3 years, which is crazy, but it happens quite often. And that's just because their income's higher. But for those individuals that make, let's say at $100,000, they have a pretty big family and it's a 20-year trajectory, a lot of them struggle with patience, and a lot of it's a mental thing. And so that is the hold up here, is when you shift your income from active to passive, it's not an overnight thing. And so like I said in the beginning, this framework is awesome, but you have to have patience for it to work, and you have to let time. And so that is the problem here. But a solution, and I talked about this earlier in the beginning, is a clear roadmap that shifts your focus to define success as the daily inputs, not the result. Let's talk about that again, because this is a really important piece of the conversation. A clear roadmap that shifts your focus to define success as the daily inputs of the system, not the result of the system. So when we talk about financial framework, and our second bullet point is build systematic engine. We know the timeline I talked about, where your stress instantly reduces, your cortisol goes down, and your blood pressure goes down, and your doctor loves you a lot more. We know that's part of the financial framework process. But the clear delineation between defining success as financial freedom already at the end, or defining success as the inputs that have to be required on a daily basis, in order to get the result. That is what you want to shift your thinking to. And when you do that, your life changes. I never think about the trophy on the wall. I never think about the degrees behind me as the trophies or the financial freedom. I don't think about the trophy ever. In fact, the trophy, when you get there, it's not as good as you think. Just plot twist. It's not as like grand because you internally have shifted the way you think internally entirely to where when you're focused on the inputs of like, I got to go to the gym every single day and I got to have a clear roadmap of what I'm doing at the gym every single day, and I got to eat good every single day, and I just focus on being those three things on a daily basis, and as long as I check the boxes, all three, that is the success. Because I know those inputs will lead and yield to bigger results and bigger trophies. And I become obsessed with the daily. I become obsessed with consistency. I become obsessed with systems because I know if I build the system the right way and I focus on the inputs to the system, I already know what the output's going to be because I've created the system. So it's not even hard for me to have patience because I know it's a clear roadmap. And this will change your life forever when you have a clear roadmap that defines and redefines success as your daily inputs to a bigger system, because you know that system, it's fluid, it works, it's going to have an outcome that you like and you desire, but you can't get the outcome if you don't put the input into the system. If I build a system and I leave, I never put anything into that system, no matter how good it is, not going to produce any results because I have no inputs. But if I focus heavily on dropping 1, 2, and 3 inputs in a day, that system's going to work automatically for itself and it's going to produce the result I want to get. And I become obsessed, hyper-focused, almost like so, what is the word? The funnel or focus, tunnel focus. I literally am so focused on that input, and I don't care about the output because I already know I'm going to get that. So I'm always so focused on what's going to make the difference. And so the inputs you can almost automate, in fact. And so let me talk about this as well. Is when you go back and summarize this financial freedom framework and the problems, the situations of each, and the problems and solutions, the first thing was making money. And so if you make enough money, we talked about the problem and solution there, and we're able to focus on the input, which is the savings component of making that money or the investing component of making that money, all I have to do is focus on the inputs like a lot, but instead of manually putting that money into the system every day, taking my hand and putting it in like this, I don't have to think about it if I automate that process. So I focus on how do I systemize the inputs? How do I automate the inputs into the bigger system? Then I'm automating from top bottom. The only thing I have to do is show up to work. If I show up to work, but I have an automation into my investments that then feeds as an automatic input into my automatic system, and my automatic system produces an automatic output, I know all I have to do is one simple thing: show up to work and not recklessly spend money. And if I focus on that, and I only focus on those little two things, show up to work, do my job, don't overspend, I am reducing the amount of friction and resistance in my human brain to mess this up. But if I don't build a system and I manually try to go invest, and then I sometimes do, I sometimes don't, and then I don't know where it's leading me, human biases are going to take over. The human psyche is going to take over without question. There is no chance for success if I manually throw some money at the dartboard or the investments every once in a while when I feel like it. Like, there's no chance for success. You will absolutely fail miserably if you manually do this. So this is why I talk about systems so much and having frameworks and simplifying. I do it for my team. I do it for my wealth building journey. I do it for my family. Like, I do all of these things to make things super simple because I know we are very complex beings with a lot of different things going on in our mind. And we want to simplify the systems in our life to produce the good result. So let's summarize this a little bit, guys. The financial freedom framework is step number 1, we make money. Step number 2 is we build a systematic engine for that money. Step 3 is we join wealth groups and surround ourselves with like-minded people. Step 4 is we buy cash flowing assets. And step 5 is we shift income from active income to passive income entirely. If you apply what we talked about today, and you let this ride for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, depending on your income, depending on that first step, make money, you will become financially free. I can guarantee it. I don't guarantee a lot of stuff, but the thing is, I guarantee my systems work. I do not guarantee people work. I guarantee that my systems work. The Roadmap to Financial Freedom, A Millionaire's Guide to Building Automated Wealth, my national bestseller, Budget Dog Academy, I can guarantee that works. And so if you want to apply to work with my team, go into the show notes here below and apply to work with my team. I guarantee the system works. Are you willing to put in the effort to build the system, or to make the money to build the system, to join the group, being at Budget Dog Academy, to buy the cash flowing assets, to shifting your income from active to passive? Are you willing to do the work? If you're willing to do the work and you simplify the work in the meantime and focus on the inputs, you will yield the result of the system that we build for you and that you define as what you want that result to be. It's an easy process. I've done it for myself. I've done it for 1,500 people and counting. And if you want that, you know where to meet me. Apply in the show notes below, and I will see you guys next week.
You've been listening to Money on My Mind with your host, Brendan Schlagbaum. If you found value in today's discussion, share it with someone who could benefit from it too. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, so you never miss a money mastery tip. Until next time, stay passionate about your financial journey and keep taking bold steps towards your money goals.